All right, so let's say I'm graphing this. First of all, it's sine, so it takes that S curve. Secondly, it's got a negative, which means this is going to be flipped upside down. Then my A is -1, which is that upside down. The amplitude is 1. The B is this whole thing, because it's what's next to the X. So B is actually 4 pi over 3. The period is 2 pi over that. So I would keep, change, flip it. And then 2 goes into 4 twice, and the pi's cancel. And my period is 3 over 2. There's no rule that says period has to have pi in it. So like people tend to freak out if it doesn't, but it doesn't have to. Now the first key point is 0. The next one would be 3/2 times 1/4. Then 3/2 times 1/2. Then 3/2 times 3/4. And then the last one is 3/2. So 0, 3 over 8, 3 over 4, 9 over 8, and 3 over 2. So 0, 3/8, 3/4, 9/8, 3/2. Amplitude is 1. And then it's sine. It normally starts at 0, goes up to 1, comes down to 0, down to -1, back up. And it would look like that if it was a positive sign. Because it's a negative sign, I flip that direction. So I start at 0, I go down first, I come back up, down. Your test is going to have one sign, it's going to have one cosine, it's going to have at least one reflection, it's going to have at least one with a changed amplitude, it's going to have at least one with a vertical stretch, so you want to, a vertical shift. So you want to make sure that you're prepared for all that stuff. Like if at the end this said -2, I would do everything I just did. I would even flip it already, and then I would shift everything down 2 places. So my curve would look something like that. So I would shift it down. That's not exactly accurate, but it would look more like that. Okay. Again, if it had a vertical shift. So I do the vertical shift at the very end. If there's a flip, I already flip it. If there's a change in the key point, I already change it. And then the very last thing I do is move it based on its vertical shift. Chris.
I had a question for y equals sine pi x.
Cosine pi x.
Because I understand the process, it's just like when I got to the actual graph, like I still have the pi term in point, but I think on the web is sine.
It doesn't, right? Yeah. Okay, so A is 1, which is your amplitude. B is pi. So the period should be 2 pi over pi, and that's why they're gone. It's just 2. First one is 0, then 2 times 1/4, 2 times 1/2, 2 times 3/4, and the last one is 2. So this is 1/2, 1, 3/2, and 2.
It's cosine 5 pi.
Oh, 5 pi? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Ooh, okay. So then it's 2/5. So then this is 1/10. This is gone 1/5. This is 2 3/10, and then 2/5. And then it's cosine, so we start at the amplitude. Down, down, up, up.
So we just carry the pi with it as well.
Yep, like whatever's, anything that's next to it. Sometimes it's over it, like, so sometimes you could see something like cosine of pi x over 2, and then Pi over 2 is your b. Everything except the x would be your b. You're welcome. Yep. Like that? Like this is in parentheses. Okay. All right, so A is 3, which is your amplitude. B is 3. So the period is 2 pi over 3, or 2 pi over 3. That stays that way. This plus 4 is a vertical shift up 4, so that's the very last thing I'm going to do. I take the 0, and then I take the 2 pi over 3 times a fourth, 2 pi over 3 times a half, 2 pi over 3 times 3/4, and then the last one, 2 pi over 3. This stays a 0. This would be pi over 6, pi over 3, pi over 2, and the last one stays as 2 pi over 3. Zero, pi over 6, pi over 3, pi over 2, 2 pi over 3. Amplitude is 3. So before I shift it up, it's a sine curve. It goes here, 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 and it looks like that. But then because of the shift up 4, I literally take all those points and shift them up. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oops. And that's your answer. This one on the bottom, you can leave, like, as long as, like we talked about it yesterday, but like you could highlight your answer. You could point to it. You could do however you want to say that that's the one that's your end result. Okay, I'll pull out colored pencils tomorrow. If you want to do that, that's fine. But make sure that you shift it at the end. Yeah. X minus pi over 2 in the parentheses, like that? Okay. Yes, but I'm going to give you the disclaimer that remember, this is not on your test because it has a phase shift. Okay. Do you want to wait and go over it next week so you don't get confused? Okay. Do you want me to do it up until the phase shift point, though?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll tell you, this is where it would stop. My A is still 1. The B is 1. So the amplitude is 1. And the period is 2 pi. So first point is 0. Then 2 pi times a fourth. A half. 3/4. And last one, 2 pi. So stays the same. Pi over 2. Pi. 3 pi over 2. Stays the same. If I was to keep going, this is what I would now take this, set it equal to 0, and my phase shift is a positive pi over 2. So I would take all these points and add pi over 2 to each. And then when you do that, it shifts everything over. So this first one would be pi over 2. And then because it's cosine, I would start at the amplitude here, down, down, up, up. I did too many key points. Okay, but everything would have shifted to the right. The phase shift will come, like when we come back from break, you guys will have a quiz on the last couple graphs, and it will include the phase shift. We're going to do tangent, secant, and cosecant next week, and that will be on that stuff. Sophia.
So what's the difference of that being in the parentheses and it not being in parentheses?
If it didn't have parentheses, that pi over 2, which it wouldn't be usually a pi, but it would be a vertical shift instead of a horizontal shift. So if it said y equals cosine of x plus, what was it, plus or minus? Minus pi over 2 like that, this is a vertical shift now, not a horizontal shift.
So if it's plus, it's still the same.
Yep, still would be that would be a vertical shift as well. If it's inside the parentheses with the x, if you're adding or subtracting inside the parentheses with the x, that's when you have to do the phase shift. So it shifts right or left. If it's not inside the parentheses with the x, then it's a vertical shift.
And when do you have to like actually add it and you can't just...
If it's a phase shift. So if it's in the parentheses.
Oh,
Yeah.
Have to add it to the, like...
You have to add it to the key points like you would have done over here. Yeah. All right, so it says find the measure of the central angle in radians if the arc length is 23 inches and the radius is 7. So because it's arc length, I'm using the SOR formula. It literally gives you the length, that's your S. I'm looking for theta, and it gives you the R is 7. So then I just divide both sides by 7, and it's going to be on the calculator portion. 23 divided by 7 is 3.286. And that's already in radians, so I leave it alone. That's my answer. You're welcome. Anything else from the first page? Yeah.
Oh, so can we tell... How do we know if it's in radians or not?
The formula is in radians. This theta is in radians.
Oh, I thought it was telling us to put it in radians. Oh.
No. It's already in radians. If it wanted it into degrees, then I'd have to convert it into degrees. So when we plug in for theta, we have to convert to radians. Like the question before, this had to be converted to radians. But when you're solving it, it's already in it. But a plus and minus usually means there's 4 answers. Like not if it was sine and cosine. Let's say it said sine of s equals plus and minus 1. That's going to have 2 answers because it's like where the y is positive 1, which would be pi over 2, and negative 1, which would be 3 pi over 2. But if it's your regular non-quadrant angles, then that usually means there's 4 answers. The tan being 1 happens at all the over 4s. So if it's positive 1, it would happen at pi over 4 and 5 pi over 4. And if it's negative 1, it happens at 3 pi over 4 and 7 pi over 4. So if you want to separate it out, you could. Like where is tan positive 1 and then where is tan negative 1. But really, if it's a plus or minus, it's usually going to happen 4 times. Unless it's like that quadrant angle, like sine is equal to positive or negative 1. So if I said like where cosine of s equals plus and minus the square root of 3 over 2, you're looking for every x being either positive root 3 over 2 or negative root 3 over 2, and that happens at every over 6. So it would be 4 over 6s. Pi over 6, 5 pi over 6, 7 pi over 6, 11 pi over 6. Questions on page 3. So this had the graphing on the top. If you didn't do the graphing yet because you did the homework and you've got questions on that, obviously we'll go there next. But then remember, you don't need to do the phase shift one. So 77, the phase shift will not be included on your test. Yeah.
So the vertical shifts will be on the phase shifts, not...
Correct. Vertical, reflection, the stretch or the shrink, all that stuff will be on there, just not the stuff we did yesterday, not the phase shift. Okay, and then the bottom part was your calc part. Yeah. Correct, and then you just flip it upside down. So I do everything the same, find your same key points, all that stuff, and then at the end, flip it upside down. Okay, this is the extra review that I just put on this morning. It's got the unit circle on the top. And then it literally says find the exact value. So there's a lot of practice with the non-calculator here. It leads all the way into these. So you do as much of these as you need to do, okay? Then it's find the S over the interval. Again, no calculator, so that's all the unit circle based. Keeps going on the third page with that, like the non-calculator part. Then it goes to graph the function. I crossed out 20 because it's got a phase shift and it's secant. We didn't do those yet. 21 and 22, we haven't done these yet. That will be next week's. So they're not on your test. And 23, crossed it out. Then comes the calculator part. So the calculator part here is where you're finding the angle. So you have to use your reference angle and then use the all students take calculus. There should really be, for most of them, 2 answers. And then comes the reverse. So I'm actually finding the sine and the cosine. These are the ones that have 1 answers. The directions say to round or truncate. Truncate means just drop off. Like don't try to bump up or round down. That's what truncate means. Your test will tell you to round. So just keep that in mind. And I think it's 3 decimal places. And then the bottom is your length of the arc. I would say if you want some extra practice, area is going to appear too, so you can always practice that. And those you're rounding. Oh, I think the answers are rounded to 3 decimal place. Because that's going to be on your calculator part as well. So this is kind of the opposite order. If you want to go in the same order as your test, flip the order. All the calculator stuff is going to come first, and then you're going to switch to the non-calculator part.